Reports now that the Russian ambassador who was shot in Turkey is dead. I haven't seen that confirmed by major news sources yet, but I am seeing that by some. I see your tweet here, John, from just a few minutes ago. I have never expected, much less wanted, my expertise in the Sarajevo 1914 assassination and coming of World War I to be too relevant. Hashtag Ankara. What do you see going on here?
Well, it's a heck of a day. The Russian state media is reporting that Alexei Karlov, the Russian ambassador, a longtime foreign ministry official, is dead. It shouldn't be surprising. There's video all over the internet of the shooting. He was shot multiple times at close range at an art gallery in Ankara. This actually was his first sort of big public to-do since the rapprochement between the Turks and Russians, who just a few months ago were ready to kill each other. If you recall, Turkish Air Force shot down a Russian fighter jet on the border with Syria, and things have gotten better, and now this. The assailant has been tentatively identified as a Turkish police officer. That is not confirmed, but that appears to be the case, which would explain why he was able to get so close to the ambassador, and there wasn't much security otherwise. This is a terrible thing. I mean, this is how wars start. I'm not saying it's going to, but these are the sorts of misunderstandings between states where there's great tension, as there is throughout the entire Middle East and the Near East right now over Syria and a lot of other things. These are the events that can really get out of hand, so let's hoping it doesn't.
Now, the way that this is going to go down, I would assume, is that no matter what the official line is on the background and motivations of the assassin here, people are going to sort of ascribe any number of motivations to it, and there'll be a lot of both sort of conspiracy theory pushing and also just people that are trying to sort of look at what the next steps will be. I mean, how are the Turks going to frame this? How are the Russians going to approach this? What do you see the various parties involved here doing in response?
Well, first of all, let's get out there that both Turkey and Russia are countries which love conspiracy theories and have governments that are never really straight with the public anyway, which is a great vehicle for conspiracy theories taking hold of a narrative. So you can expect, as I said, this is going to be the kook Super Bowl or World Cup of conspiracy theories here, this assassination. The Turks who are already making dark hints about conspiracies and foreign intelligence involvement, will pin this on Kurds or the Gulenist conspiracy, which is this leading imam who actually lives in Pennsylvania that has become the public enemy number one of the Erdogan regime recently. The Russians, for their part, undoubtedly will finger jihadists, presumably ISIS here. We do see on the footage that is available that the gunman made a statement about, we're dying in Aleppo, of course, city in Syria under siege. You die here. He held up his finger, which is a sort of a standard jihadist one-finger salute. So the Russian case, this may have been an ISIS operation. Certainly well could be, but I wouldn't expect the Turks to sign off on that just yet.
All right, now let's talk a bit about there'll be more about this coming out, obviously, and it's really, in a sense, I said this at the beginning of the hour, anytime there's an ambassador who's assassinated, it's a surprise, there's a sort of moment of shock, but given what's happening in Aleppo, that any Russian figure would be targeted right now, anywhere in the world, quite honestly, is something that they must be now obviously even more prepared for, but it is not out of the blue, in the sense that you can draw a pretty straight line between Russian intervention in Aleppo and people deciding they're going to try to even the score somewhere.
Absolutely. I think no one should be surprised that this happened, frankly. I am surprised that the late ambassador didn't seem to have any Russian security with him at this public event, certainly not as visible in the footage we've seen, and that's been reported without confirmation. And that seems to be a very non-Russian way to approach this, given that the threat had to be real. The Russian involvement supporting the Syrian regime and its campaign to subdue Aleppo and then crush various rebellions in Syria has gotten Russia enormously bad press in radical Islamist circles around the world. That a Russian ambassador has been shot, frankly, unfortunately, shouldn't surprise anyone.
Now let's talk a bit about the latest on Russia, and we'll continue to follow this, and we'll have John back when we have more information, if there is more, on sort of the background of the assassin and who takes credit for it. But for now, it's still in the sort of hours after breaking news status. What's the latest on the Russian involvement in the election? I mean, everyone is still in this country engaged in this battle, and as you and I have talked about it, John, Russia was involved. Russia didn't throw the election. You can hold these two things simultaneously, and yet people seem to want to push one or the other all the time.
Right, and this is where both the Republicans and Democrats have decided to adopt a different set of lies. Okay, they'll call it a narrative, but really these are dishonesties. First of all, the Trump team, and I shouldn't say all Republicans, but the Trump team has decided that Russia had absolutely nothing to do with hacking anyone, much less disinformation. You have mouthpieces for the campaign like Roger Stone tweeting out that really the source of the purloined Democratic emails was some American leaker. Maybe it was really NSA. It certainly wasn't the Russians. And this is just nonsense. And soon-to-be President Trump is out there saying almost the same thing, indicating there's really no Russian story, which is complete nonsense. We know, and not just the U.S. government, but plenty of outside experts know it was a Russian front, essentially, who hacked the emails or intercepted them using some modern techniques and then passed them to WikiLeaks. That's not up for debate. However, the Democrats are now engaging in an equally dishonest counter-narrative that it was all the Russians, that somehow Hillary was robbed of her rightful prize on the 8th of November due to Russian clandestine malfeasance. Look, we need to find some middle ground. The facts are these. Covert action by itself cannot create political circumstances. Okay? It can only manipulate what's already there. It was not Russian intelligence who made Hillary run an awful campaign that told huge swaths of the American public they were deplorable and therefore don't deserve our compassion and understanding. It wasn't Russian intelligence who made Hillary run a private server for her email at the State Department in her bathroom, thereby allowing them to be exploited by Lord knows how many intelligence services. That was Hillary. The Russians played a dirty game. It was illegal. It was wrong. It needs to be combated. But there's no evidence the Russians per se elected Hillary. And the narrative there is so much easier for the Democrats to swallow than actually confronting why they lost.
I know later on I'm going to have Steve Yates on. I don't know if you know Steve. He was a Bush administration official, deputy national security advisor to Dick Cheney, also a guy with a lot of expertise in East Asia. And I'm going to ask him, okay, see, we all know that China seizing and I'm getting ahead of myself here, we haven't talked about it on the show today, but the underwater unmanned vehicle, the UUV, that's a provocation, right? And then, of course, the question, and everyone says we need to do something, and it usually falls apart a little bit on the do something, right? What's the proper response to somebody seizing your vehicle? I mean, your underwater unmanned vehicle. I want to ask you, what is the proper response to what Russia's done? Because I feel like one of the arguments that's constantly being made now is, well, we need to investigate because we need better security because this is about the integrity of our elections. And I'm with you. Yeah, Russia did this. And it seems increasingly clear they did do it to help Trump at some point, at some level in the game. They're like, you know what, let's do more to help Trump than hurt Hillary. But knowing all that already, what do we get from an investigation other than telling John Podesta, don't open a Bitly link in your email that says reset your password here?
Right. I mean, a couple things. First of all, I think we need a genuine bipartisan joint multi-committee congressional investigation just to try to bring some consensus here. It's not going to work, but we need to try for the good of the integrity of our political system. We need better cybersecurity. That's obvious. It's gone in the tank under Obama. We need to take cybersecurity a lot more seriously. But you're never going to stop this. This is normal signals intelligence in the 21st century. This is SIGINT. We do it. The Russians do it. Everyone does it. What we need to do is deter the Russians from doing these sorts of covert actions again to manipulate our politics. And that, I think, is doable. If you send a message to the Russians, cut it out. We know you're intercepting these messages. And by the way, if you're an important person in Washington and you're using open email, the Russians, the Chinese, others are almost certainly reading it. And just accept it. Probably don't put things in that email that you don't want possibly someone to see down the road. And by the way, Republicans who are currently gloating at Democrats about the embarrassment of all the emails that have been leaked by WikiLeaks, that is to say Moscow, better keep in mind the Russians have their emails too. And if they change their mind about who they want back in Washington, this can get very embarrassing for you. What Obama should have done, but did not do, refused to do, shut down efforts to do, was to actively combat Russian disinformation, point out where they're lying, and also send a message to the Russians that they will understand. If their intelligence services are acting in ways that violate our laws flagrantly, throw them all out. We know who almost all the Russian intelligence officers in America are at their embassies and consulates, posing as diplomats, trade officials, whatnot. This is where we, in spy speak, you PNG them. You make them persona non grata. You throw them out. Break their espionage network in this country. That will be a message that Putin, the former counterintelligence officer, will understand loud and clear.
So there are things we can do. See, this is
Absolutely.
We get into this discussion, and people are always saying, "Well, what are we going to do?" There are means of pushing back against this, short of, as I think a lot of people like to say, nuclear war. It doesn't have to be fire the Trident missiles.
Exactly. And this option is presented as A, do nothing, B, Armageddon. And that's nonsense. That's just crazy talk. There is a language of this sort of spy war that Putin especially understands. Throw out their spies, start undertaking aggressive operations against them. It has been suggested by some that, of course, we know lots of dirty secrets of how Putin's Russia's really run. We do, by the way, and that we should leak them. We should pull a WikiLeaks on them. I'm not sure that's wise. That really could get very ugly in the tit-for-tat range, but make it very clear to the Russians, we know what you're doing, and you really have to cut it out right now.
Yeah, Russia, not a good place to be a critic of the regime, as we know.
That's right.
All one has to do is talk to Alexei Navalny, any number of other individuals over there, and you find out very quickly there are problems.
Yeah, absolutely. And those are legitimate angles for us to exploit, and there's plenty of ways to exploit them short of going to war. I mean, this is just crazy talk. I mean, we're not going to war with Russia over this, but we do have to at least give them a cost of their actions, make it expensive for them in terms that they care about as a disincentive to doing more of it. We can't change anything. The horses are already out of the barn. Obama wants to shut the barn now, months too late. It doesn't matter now. What matters is where we go from here.
John Schindler is the national security columnist for the New York Observer. He's at 20 Committee on Twitter. We're actually going to keep him through the break because we're going to talk about World War I for a little bit on the other side, and a column John wrote on that I highly commend to all of you. John, stay with us, please. Team, we'll be right back. On Twitter, he's the columnist for the New York Observer on national security. Great piece he wrote over the weekend, The Butcher's Bill of 1916, Europe's blood-drenched year of horror. John, we've only got a few minutes, but I wanted you to just sort of walk us through a bit of what you talk about here, the anniversary of the end of the Battle of Verdun.
Yeah, I mean, the 100th anniversary of that horrible battle's ending was on the weekend, 100 years. And I was just trying to make the point that, one, as bad as things seem in Europe right now, and they're pretty bad between mass Muslim migration, rising terrorism, lots of instability in Eastern Europe, but things are really pretty great now compared to where they were 100 years ago, when Europe was in the middle of killing itself, murdering off millions of its own young men, and then middle-aged men, and just men, and destroying their civilization, which at the time was by far the dominant one in the world. And how this happened is not an accident, and I think history matters. And the lessons of 1916 are also that it's really hard to stop things once you get them going. And in 1916 was the year where the fighting on all the fronts in World War I had become static and attritional, and the victory would come to the side that lasted the longest in these horrible conditions, which was, of course, what happened at the end of 1918, and that no one knew how to make it stop, how to turn the meat grinder off. And this meant that at Verdun, at the Somme, on the Isonzo front in Italy, on the Eastern Front, on every front, European armies were killing each other in numbers no one had ever seen, literally by the millions. Yet it wasn't changing anything strategically. And this sort of stalemate would lead to the political collapse of Russia in 1917, and of course with that the coming of communism and all the nightmares that followed, and the collapse of the German Empire and Austria-Hungary, and of course the Ottoman Empire too in 1918, creating this sort of disordered world in parts of Europe and the Middle East that we're still dealing with today.
It is amazing, as you point out of the piece, that there were fronts in that war that are essentially completely forgotten to a vast majority of people, including battles and periods on those fronts when, as you said, hundreds of thousands, if millions of people were killed.
Yeah, there's this very strange bias in the English-speaking world toward the Western Front, which, I mean, the bias itself isn't odd because that's where most English-speaking soldiers fought. And also they'll throw in a little interest in other fronts if there are English speakers there. You know, they've heard of Gallipoli, the famous battle in Turkey in 1915, because there was a movie a long time ago with Mel Gibson in it about that, and that was when he was sort of young and hot and not the sort of furry anti-Semite he is today. So people have heard of that. But beyond that, it's a huge gap. And the other fronts, I've written books on other fronts, the Italian front, the Eastern front, that are huge, that were absolutely decisive to the outcome of the war. But frankly, they get really undersold in the English-speaking world, and most Americans fairly just haven't heard about them.
Give us a John Schindler book to buy on the First World War, and then also give us your.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to say, and give us your other than Schindler, give us your best World War I book all time.
Well, if you want a one-stop shop, the book by Hugh Sprawn, the one-volume work is outstanding. The one-volume work by the late John Keegan called The First World War is a great sort of one-stop intro to the whole struggle. I've published a couple books from World War I, one in 2001 called Isonzo, The Forgotten Sacrifice of the Great War, about the Italian front. And my new one came out just right about a year ago.
John, thank you.
The Buck Sexton Show. Only on the Blaze.